Sure, my name is David or Dave Wallace. I reached the final rank of lieutenant in the United States Navy Reserve active duty. There were a couple of stories that stand out. Well, there's so many that stand out, but I guess it was my third week alone with me and my sort of green crew. We're down to the mouth of the Bossack, and we get this incredibly long message from Sepia, and it's all in code, so you have to go, oh, geez, this three-letter code group means this, and this three-letter code group means this, and so you get 60 or 70 groups of code. It takes, so we're breaking the code and we're breaking it. I got the leading petty officer is breaking the first half, I'm breaking the second half. And we finally get it to proceed immediately to, this is emergency or emergency flash, top secret, blah, blah, blah. And what had happened is probably the top Navy intelligence guy in Vietnam had gone down. And he wasn't supposed to be, number one, he wasn't supposed to be in an airplane. Number two, he certainly wasn't supposed to be where it was. But they had gone down, and so here's the new guy is the closest swift boat. And we go up into this canal system that most of the canals weren't wide enough to turn the boat around. I mean, even ramming the bow way up on the beach, you couldn't turn around it. So you just had to kind of keep going until you found a place wide enough. We stayed in there for 3 days looking for this poor guy. And I just, it's one of those sort of things that's easy to forget, but 3 days in these tiny little canals with guys that had just started living and working together 3 weeks earlier was, that was kind of a neat time. I mean, we didn't find him, unfortunately. He's missing in action still, presumed KIA. He had come from Hawaii, SINCPAC then staff, and he was like an assistant intelligence super guy for SINCPAC. And everybody sort of drew the conclusion he probably ended up in Russia within 2 weeks of going down, because they did have some confirmation that he walked away from the crash, he and the pilot. So, but that was awful. That was worse than any firefight I was ever in terms of pressure. A couple other things stood out. Again, very early on, and part of this was in a short story, I guess, that I wrote a long time back, and a fellow named Terry Garlock, who, if you're a Vietnam historian, you probably have run into Terry or heard of him. Dumbass from Georgia, helicopter pilot, Cobra pilot actually, and crashed twice, ended up breaking his back, and so he came home, after 6 months or something. Spent a long time in a hospital, still doesn't get around well, but I've met Terry, and he asked me to write this up. We had been working with this tiny little village on an island in the Bossack. If you can imagine a kidney-shaped island almost, and in the middle of it on the downstream side was a small canal, 80 yards long, that went in. And then you were in the middle of the island, and you had island on all sides of you, but there was room in there that you could put a ton of sampans in there. You could run a swift boat up there and do med caps and all kinds of interesting things and meet the people. I mean, we had been up there a couple days before and drunk rice wine with the village chief and met his wife and everything. The kids up there were great. We get a call about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, and I had finally started to drift off, and the unwritten rule I think on most of the swift boats in the rivers was the O&C can sleep whenever he can, because whenever anything important happened, I had to be there. I mean, it was just, I had to answer questions about why Jones got killed or why we sunk the boat. I mean, But so the crew wakes me and says, we got a problem here. We're getting messages from one of the Army guys or from this Army base over here. And, you know, they got a problem. They're being overrun and want us to come up and see if we can help. And I said, okay, great. You know, like this, call Sepia, tell them. And so this leading petty officer, really great guy, probably one of the best people I've known in my life, Ed West. He says, I've already tried, boss. You know, they're not answering or we're not getting out. I mean, and comms were terrible back in those days. No satellite. You had FM and you had upper sideband or single sideband. But so we went middle of the night up into this little village, into this tight little canal. And we started as we approached, and it only took us about 20 minutes, I think, to get there. But we started as we were a couple hundred meters or yards out, shooting illumination rounds with our 81 millimeter mortar. And just, I mean, basically we were trying to let people know we're coming in. And the island people, the village people, as well as the bad guys. Because we really didn't want to go in there and try to fight this alone at night, not knowing anything about the situation. We didn't even have a VN interpreter with us at that point. So when we finally pulled up, you hear in cheap novels about the smell of death and things, that was the smell, that and cordite. As we pulled up and stuck the nose of the boat on the beach. And I don't remember anything else that happened, and I remember this little lady, what we would have called a mama son. She was probably, I don't know, a great-grandmother, might have been 45 years old. I mean, people age fast in Vietnam, but very small. And I had walked out onto the bow to see if we could find out what was happening. What we found out was that they had, the village chief, who had, this guy we'd drunk rice wine with, they had chopped the back of his head off and then beat him to death with a rice mallet. Now a rice mallet's a thing about this big around, that tall, and has a handle on both sides, and they use it to pound rice. They had raped and beat his wife to death. And his daughter, that the grandmother was holding in her arms. They had hit her with the machete, which chopped a hole right exactly here, about that big around. You could, I mean, there was bone missing. You could see the inside of somebody's head. That wasn't cool. She handed this girl to me. I'm like, holy crap. You know, what, I mean, they didn't cover this. We finally pulled out. I'm still holding the girl, and I'm just, I mean, from that point on, everything was a blur. But I yelled something to West and Joe Sandoval, who was our gunner's mate, said, get us to Ben Tui, now, hospital. And took the little girl back on the fantail and sat down holding her. And guys are, you know, as soon as we got away from it, guys are bringing me flak jackets. We had wool blankets in Vietnam. Wool blankets? I mean, it never got under 80 degrees that I ever remember. Anyway, they're bringing me more flak jackets and wool blankets, and I'm holding this little girl like this. And that boat is going so fast. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, didn't find out till later. But they were pumping fuel over the side so we could go faster. Throwing boxes of ammunition over the side so we could go faster. They even pumped our drinking water out, just so that boat could get there faster. And we got there, and Ed West, or I call it, we were very formal on the boat. I mean, he was West, I was boss. I mean, you know, it was never Ed and Dave, but those were the old Navy days. He called ahead, and they had supposed to have a corpsman waiting there for us. And so I get off the boat, my little girl, started walking up, and some Navy lieutenant from Bentui comes down and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've got a wounded little girl, get out of my way." And he says, "Well, I'm in charge of these piers here, you can't do this here, you have to go somewhere." I said, "Get out of my way." I mean, the language was brutal back in those days. And I just shoved him out of the way, and he says, "I'm putting you on report for this." And I told him, basically, "You and the horse you rode in on, pal." And a chief came up, and he started to say something, and then he went, "Doc's on his way," like this. And so a Vietnamese doctor, and I had told him I wanted a US doctor, but all they could find was a Vietnamese doctor. He just goes frantic. He said, "Chet Nam, Chet Nam," which means she's dead. And she wasn't. I could feel a real faint pulse. I mean, all the way riding with her. I handed the little girl to Joe, and you've heard this story so many times, and maybe we all had it at that point, and why it seemed like such a natural reaction. Handed the little girl to Joe Sandoval, our gunner's mate, who was a big strapping Mormon kid from, Nevada. Handed her to Joe, most fluid motion. I looked like Wyatt Earp drawing that .45 out of a covered pistol. Grabbed the doctor's back of his head, .45 under the chin, and said, "Fix her now." And all of a sudden, the guy couldn't speak English, right? I mean, he's reciting Shakespearean plays, everything you can think of, in Old English, New English, probably could speak German and French too. And he takes the little girl and walks away, and that's the last we ever saw of her. And I don't think that, that and the having your stuff together to get the boat, it just brings it to you that this isn't fraternity night, this isn't, good times, this isn't, shooting mortar rounds at somebody who's, 2,000 yards or 4,000 yards away. This is about as real as it gets, and that these people we're fighting are not, they're barely human to do these kinds of things. Kind of took away any good feelings I might have had toward the bad guys over there.